All right, if you're still doing all your notes by hand, we need to talk. Othellis AI Scribe is changing the game. You walk in, you talk to your patient like you normally would, you treat them, and boom, your notes are drafted in real time. Thanks to AI. No voice commands, no clicking around. It just listens and writes. Like a scribe, but smarter. People are cutting their documentation time by 90%. That's not a typo, 90%. That's actual feedback from real clinicians using it now. You want to see it in action? Go to Othellis.com and take a test drive. That's ATHELAS.com and say goodbye to after hours charting.
We've got this particular design in ours that allows us to actually accurately dose it, which if you go into the weeds of the research behind this technology, a lot of what they said about gait training technology is that you can't dose it accurately enough to challenge somebody. There's not that active participation in a granular level where you can, really challenge someone at the level that they're at. And so we really set out to solve a lot of those problems.
Today's guest is blending high-tech neuro rehab innovation with concierge care and a dose of global mission work. He's stoked. He's not just building a career, he's building a movement in rehab, one clinician at a time. You'll hear how he's using tech to empower, not replace therapists, what big healthcare gets wrong, and why you don't need to go non-clinical to make a massive impact. Our guest today is Cody Prizer. It makes for some really good audio. Hang on. There we go. Cody, cheers. Cheers to you and cheers to me.
There we go.
I'm drinking a Pabst Blue Ribbon. This was the beer that me and my friends made fun of when we were kids because it was like the old man beer, and I never had it, in my 20s. And I think I had it like in my 30s, and I was like, this beer isn't awful. I was like, this is actually pretty good beer. Like, it's funny how like we make an assumption about something, and then that's the world, and then all of a sudden
it just sticks.
Yeah, and that assumption gets challenged 20 years later, and you're like, oh, what else was I wrong? Like, guacamole looked gross to me when I was a kid, never ate it, and now I'm like, oh my God, how many years did I not have guacamole because it looked gross, and now it's
you missed out on. Yeah.
Cody, what's your superhero backstory for people who don't know you?
Superhero backstory. So, background physical therapy. My interesting, I'd say my twist is that I entered the clinic a month after or before COVID happened.
Ooh.
So, finished PT school in 2019, moved to Nashville, took my first clinic job. Was going through clinical mentorship, just kind of get my feet wet, and COVID happened. So that kind of spun everything out of control a little bit, as we all remember. But what kind of happened there is I got put in a little bit of like a, like I say, leadership position, but I became the tenured PT in my clinic, right? So
you've been here for 9 weeks. You're in charge.
I would get maybe 3 weeks, right? And so my clinic director, he went to another, he was overseeing 2 clinics. And so I ended up with a lot of time on my hands, and I like filling my time. And so, being, I guess maybe a problem solver at heart, I really just kind of looked at the PT space. I was like, my clinic days are not very full. Began exploring just, what was out there and trying to stay interested in things, and had met some people here in Nashville that, they'd had some success on the tech side, and it kind of stimulated some interest in me, and started inventing medical device really early on. Learned a lot through that, met some really great people, spent about 2 years full-time in the clinic, and just determined that full-time clinic care was not really what I wanted to invest like my whole life trajectory into. Loved clinic, loved treating, loved the patient care sides of things, but just didn't quite see it didn't resonate with where I wanted to go, right? So moved to more like PRN type positions, worked in a hospital system, covered everything from, your cardiac step downs to joint outpatient. Like it was a really cool experience, just covering everything. Worked in a high pace, fast paced sports orthopedic practice, doing a lot of post-op, and then launched a concierge business of my own. And then ultimately, maybe about 2.5 years into that, connected with the company that I'm with now. They were looking for a project-based PT to use their technology. Ran a 6-week day program for them. Got to the end of 6 weeks, patients like, that was awesome. We'd love to, keep doing it. So I turned and looked at the team. I was like, hey, are we going to keep doing this? So did another 6 weeks, then a third 6 weeks, and a fourth and fifth. A year later, had a fully operational day program going for them. We're seeing patients 1 day a week. They opened up a spot on their business development team and joined that. So that was about a year ago doing that. And yeah, here I am.
So let's go deeper into the tech, right? Like help us understand what it is. What does it do? How does it work? Like,
Yeah.
you're a
So
tech biz dev guy now.
yeah. I'll embrace that. So the device is called the Rise and Walk. It's the first full spectrum. We call it rehab station, but it's a gait training technology. So it's a 3-in-1, meaning it can be used seated, standing, and then the body weight support system. It's a tower that rotates. So you essentially have two body weight support zones on either side. So it's a very unique piece of equipment that is really addressing some big needs when it comes to like inpatient rehab space, working with patients that have considerable mobility deficits that require maybe a team of people to get the high intensity, high repetition gait training that research is really coming out to say that it's needed. That's what's driving the neuroplastic changes that are required for somebody after a stroke just to get back on their feet and be able to engage in the community.
What's something that shocked you, like taking on this role? Like you got to bring a clinical mindset to a group of people who probably have really good technology background and sales. And sales isn't a bad word. People just want to make sure people understand that it's not a bad thing. What was the biggest thing that surprised you, like walking in with your clinical mind? Because you're going to look at the exact same thing everybody else is. You're just going to look at it differently.
Right. What I've found is that specifically, I'd say with this like tech, wave that we're riding kind of all across healthcare, is
Yeah.
that we don't have an innovation problem. We really have an adoption problem. And
Ah.
so what's interesting has been the real challenge for me is marrying the clinical need with the business value. And it's a fun challenge because the two really operate almost in silos. You can go to a rehab team and you can get clinical buy-in and you can say, hey, I have a whole clinic full of patients that would benefit from this technology. We're doing it the old-fashioned way. You can kind of show maybe where things can be optimized, and then it's bridging that to the business operations. And I think that's where you're seeing some of these large hospital systems that when we look at our healthcare system, maybe just specifically on the rehab side, comparing it to some of the other countries that are maybe a little bit more advanced than we are. I'm not in those countries. I don't know how those systems necessarily work, but what I see on our end a lot is that there tends to be some dragging of feet. People are not really wanting to invest maybe what they can into supporting the rehab process. When you look at a healthcare system, everything is diagnostic driven. How can we get a patient that has a problem? How can we identify it and get them into a treatment path? But then, when we're looking at the whole patient, how do we then actually tangibly get them better and get them back on their feet? And I think that's that's the value of rehab and PT that, unfortunately it's just hard to get, some people to invest that way.
Yeah. What do you think other clinicians that you talk to, or maybe still in clinic, right? And again, I love how you said that, which is like, it's not that I didn't love it. It's I wanted to try something else, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of what we're on this rock for, is try a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find something you love, do it. But
Right.
you've sort of adopted neuro rehab and technology. What's the biggest misunderstanding other clinicians, people that you knew before or people that you meet after, what's the biggest misunderstanding they have about technology in rehab?
Yeah, I think there's two big things there. One, I think just with technology in general, PT is a very interaction driven space where we get
Yeah.
to work with those patients. And I think in some way people look at technology, specifically some things here, as something that if they introduce, it's going to kind of remove them from that. So I think there, in some ways, people think that this technology is going to take their job or something like that, which again, that's we can unpack that further.
Do a lot.
If you
We could
want,
do a whole
right,
hour on that.
whole hour on that, right? But I think the other side of it is that we're very much like a research based healthcare. We want to see things that are proven. We want to see data that backs up why something works the way it does. And I think sometimes that's too thick of a filter to take something that you can look at just based on principle and see what it does. One thing I talk about when I get people that kind of lean in on the research side of things. So backing up, end effector technology, which is kind of the category that our device falls into, it's been around for like 20 years, right? So we didn't come out and invent something that's game-changingly new, but
What
we
was it
did.
called again? What type of technology? What was the word?
It's called end effector, right? So
I don't know that. Oh,
yeah.
affects
So
the end user.
exactly,
Oh,
right,
okay.
or
Gotcha.
the ends, your extremities.
Oh,
So if
understood.
you look at
Understood.
like an exoskeleton, right, that's very much bolt on, where you are articulating across a joint and you're influencing movement there. Um, and so you can see, yeah, I love that you were able to pull that up. I don't know if that's, I'm assuming that's showing up for everybody.
Yep.
But yeah, you can see articulating with the hands and feet, right? So it's a very open based system. Where let me do this, back up again or zoom out again. If you go hover over rise and walk, I'm going to see if we can pull up the video. Oh wait, right there, watch the video. It's right there.
Okay.
It's cool to see it in motion, right? So let me get back to kind of where I was. End effector, right? It's meaning
Yep.
articulates with the ends of our hands and feet. So um, very unique piece of technology that ultimately does the heavy lifting. That's the way I look at it. And so, when I'm talking to clients, they're like, okay, what's the research say? What does it show? Which we have research that shows it, but it's also a category of equipment that's been around for a bit. So we haven't had to do all this like leading edge proof of concept type of research out there that some people really want to see. Right. And so there's that resistance. They go, oh, well,
Sure.
you don't have that. So, I'm not going to look at this. And I go, okay, well, if, in your clinic, you have weight, right? So did you go through and study the efficacy of a 25-pound weight to then put it in your space? No. Most people would say no, right? But I can take a 25-pound weight and I can do 10,000 different exercises with it, and and have some good outcomes there. And so with technology like ours, we're really driving the high rep, high intensity type of activity. We've got this particular design in ours that allows us to actually accurately dose it, which if you go into the weeds of the research behind this technology, a lot of what they said about research, which is, or about gait training technology, is that you can't dose it accurately enough to challenge somebody. There's not that active participation in a granular level where you can, really challenge someone at the level that they're at. And so we really set out to solve a lot of those problems, some application problems, some personnel problems, and some support problems that, ultimately allowed our device to actually mesh with the US healthcare system.
Yeah, you're talking about a system, right? That's like the screwy part. It's like you're talking about clinician, patient, technology. That's a really great triangle. And then you bring in the system.
Right.
So, and I bet you a lot of things, and we don't, I mean, again, we could do another hour just on this, which is you've said healthcare is hurting rehab departments, that we are bleeding out. And then how can we fix it? Because that's where we plug into this system. So
Mm-hmm.
like, what is it? Who's going to pay for it? Is it how are we going to get reimbursed for it? Like I imagine like those are the first two questions, right? How are we going to get reimbursed for it? And then how much is it? Which is how often do I have to use so I can at least pay for itself and then
Justification.
making money? Which sounds like a
Yeah.
dirty question, but it's just like we got to be able to make enough money to pay for it, and then also we have to pay for people's salaries and health insurance and lights and
Yeah.
the parking lot and all those things that people forget about.
Yeah. The ugly truth is that healthcare is a business, right?
It
And so you
is.
can preach outcomes and, till you preach till you're blue in the face, but at the end of the day, it's a business and you have to cater to the business side of it. And so I think when you look at technology in the space, a lot of it wasn't designed in the US. You got big players in Israel and, Italy and, a lot of these kind of Europe and Asian countries that they're designing this technology to meet a patient profile or meet something that they're seeing within their industry, but then it's being pushed over into the US for the market that we have here, and it's just not designed to meet the needs that we have. And so that was
Yeah.
one of the considerations that we had, is we knew to succeed that we would have to make something that really worked with our patient population. But to your point, how do you get paid? Like, reimbursement is what it drives. So, unfortunately, and I think this is something that, we'll hopefully see in the next couple of years, is some type of CPT kind of reform or evolution there, that, we've learned how to abuse that system. And, unfortunately, on the rehab side of things, CPT codes and what we're currently being reimbursed for our services, they leave a lot of these rehab departments, unfortunately, in the red. And
Yep.
when you look at a large healthcare system, it's hard for them to justify investing in a great piece of technology that will undoubtedly help their patients and help their clinicians, but it's like, hey, we're not making money in this department, so why are we going to
Right.
invest in something like that? And so
Right.
it's an unfortunate reality. Again, it's a business, and you got to play the game. And so I think at some point something will change, because if you look at somebody that has a spinal cord injury or a stroke, it's not the same episode of care like somebody has a knee replacement, right? Knee replacement, you might get 2 to 3 months of PT, and then they're off managing their care on their own. But somebody has some kind of incomplete spinal cord injury, or any type of neurological injury, like it's going to
Sure.
affect them for probably the majority of the rest of their life, if not the whole thing. And our one thing that I really love about our technology is that it provides an environment for somebody to get the same general activity that I can go. I got a gym in my garage. Very blessed there, so it's really convenient for me to go exercise and train. But somebody that has a mobility deficit, they can't just go walk around the neighborhood to go for a run or lift weights. And so it's really hard to give somebody the opportunity to exercise and expend, get the cardiovascular benefits that we can get by walking. And I think,
Sure.
that's something that, again, it's unique that we're able to do that. And I'm proud of our technology and what we're able to do. So,
All right, here's a question. What would you do with an extra hour every day? It's not a trick question. That's what a bunch of physical therapists are saying after switching to Empower EMR by MW Therapy. It's built on automation and AI. So basically, it becomes your clinic's co-pilot. It keeps your schedule full, handles billing like a pro, and cuts way down on paperwork headaches. But here's the kicker. It's not some generic system. It's made for physical therapists by people who know what you deal with day in and day out. You want more patience? Done. Easier documentation? Done. Less stress? Yes, please. Empower lets you be the hero of your clinic with happier patients, less burnout, and better profits. Book your demo today at mwtherapy.com and see why switching just might be the easiest win of your year. You've also taken your skills abroad. Is that true? What's something you did some medical mission work? What's something from your work that stays with you every day here now that you're back in the US?
Yeah. So when I was in PT school, I had an instructor, and I shout out Todd Bourgeois. I'll send him this. He's the man. He's a mentor of mine. But he and I was in St. Augustine. We surfed all the time, and it came summertime. He's like, "Hey man, we got a team of PTs and kind of hodgepodge rehab professionals, medical professionals. We go to El Salvador every year. Go there for a week and a half, whatever it may be. We get to surf, we get to treat, we get to work with their underserved populations along the coast there, and it's kind of just like a good vibes trip. We bring people, we do as much good work as we can, and then we enjoy it, and we come back. And so I was blessed to get invited as a student. Went 2 times there. I think I've been back now 6 times. So we've been doing these trips. They've been doing them for, I want to say, like 10 or 12 years, but it's been great to go to Central America, see what's happening there from like a development standpoint, get to serve populations of people that just in some ways maybe feel forgotten.
Sure.
They have socialized medicine, so care's accessed much differently. So yeah, those have been some awesome experiences for me, especially starting as a student, getting into clinic care, and then continuing to go down there and see these communities that we've been serving for years now.
I did one in my 3rd year, a service learning trip. I did one my 3rd year PT school, and I love cliches, right? I like to make fun of cliches. And the cliche with like a trip like that is you get out much more than you put in. And it's true. Like I learned, I definitely thought I couldn't wait because there's a team of 3rd year PT students that were going to go down there and show how smart we were. And I learned the whole time. It's amazing. Like once that was the thing. Once I was able to sort of like drop it and stop trying to show, and I was just able to
Mm-hmm.
like absorb and take in, that's when I was like, oh, there's a whole lot more I could learn.
Yeah, we we've coined these trips as Stoke Trips, right? And so the idea that like we all have this kind of inner fire, if you will, that is kind of like passion driven, right? And so just like, if you build a fire, you have to tend it, you have to stoke it. And so these trips for us, it's kind of a play on words, if you will, because we get to surf, right? So there's a lot of like,
Sure.
stoke on that side of it,
Stokes.
right? But, for the deeper sense of like, we get to go there and we get to treat people who don't expect a group of Americans to show up and give freely and just help them, right? They're in these communities that, they don't have medical care. They have to hop on a bus. It takes them 3 hours just to get into the city, just to sit in line to potentially seen by a doctor that day. They have to, labor and walk to get water just to bring it back to, the little place that they might live in. And so to show up and just sit there and just to do whatever we can for them, whether it's medical, whether, it's just saying, I'm gonna pray for you, something like that. It's like just the way that it's received and the joy that these people live with is, it sticks with you. Like you said, you bring it back with you. I get as much out of it, if not
Yeah,
more
if not
than
more.
what I leave behind.
Yeah, it's a big deal. So more emotions, more stoke. A lot of PTs might say, it's either clinical or non-clinical, right? There's burnout or you're bailing out. You're doing a little
Mm-hmm.
bit of both. I've given a
Yeah.
talk at Nazareth College, thanks to Professor Mike Hewson up there. He brings me in and a couple other clinicians who have either traditional or non-traditional practices. He brings in like Russ. Russ is a PT. He's got a brick and mortar clinic, and he brings in this other woman who's like, I treat out of my house. I got a little room in my house. He brings me in because I'm a weirdo. Like I do communications, whatever I do.
You're all
Like
over the place.
I'm all over the place. And I think, and the I like to put it in their words. I love to use patient's words or audience words. I say it's hips and shoulders. A hip and a shoulder, they're both ball and socket joints, right? Hip is going to be super deep, right? A lot of stability, some mobility, right? But a lot of stability. That to me is like a 9 to 5 job, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's nothing wrong with that. If you're like, I'm going to have a 9 to 5 job and I'm going to have this thing on the side. Now you got a shoulder, which is every other weekend I do aquatics on my own or something.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of flexibility, a lot of mobility, some stability, right? And you can have all shoulder. Some people are just like, I do whatever I want, however I want. And one of the students was like, which one's better? And I said, which one is better for you? Like you're
Yeah.
looking for the answer and you knew they're smart kids, right? I call them kids because they feel so much younger than me. But I'm like, the answer is it depends. And also it doesn't have to be, this is what I do forever. I could do this. You were doing your stuff for 6 weeks at a time. Had you said, I don't like this anymore, you would have been like, all right, well, thanks so much for the last 6 weeks. Like, and we're going to part ways. So
Right.
I feel like what have you learned that could help others by being able to say, hey, I don't want to be in a clinic 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And that's not necessarily quitting. It's not quitting. You just took your skills to a non-familiar place, to quote a friend.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think if you just look at our education system, we're kind of forced to make a decision super early on when we're still figuring things out.
Sure.
And so,
Right.
for me, like I went through undergrad, jumped right into PT school, and then jumped right into my professional career. The unique thing, what I identified pretty early on is that from a physical therapist standpoint, we get such a diverse background, right?
Yeah.
We know so much about the human body. We get such a unique experience in our healthcare system, from working in hospitals to outpatient clinics to private practice to, specialties, you name it. There's so many different things you can do. And I think people almost get, maybe it's like analysis paralysis, where they go, I don't know what else I can do, so I'm just going to stay in clinic care. For me, what's been great is talking and networking and connecting with people in order to just see what's out there, right? And so I've had a very unique experience in my 5 years that I've been out of the clinic, and I've touched so many different things and been in so many different settings, and for me, it's hard not to get bothered when you hear people that are so divisive between clinical and non-clinical. It's like, I do both,
Yeah.
I'm in a business development role. I work for a startup company. But I also have a concierge practice, like I treat on the side, keeps my skills sharp. It allows me to be a resource in the communities around me, to my friends, my families. And that's something that I think is very unique to the PTs. It's like we can walk in a room and we can have nothing but, I mean, our hands and a human in front of us, and we can help them. We can talk them through things. We can explain things, and I think when we're trying to figure out, what we want to do, how we want to, engage with our healthcare system, it's like we're kind of dealt a tough hand of cards, but we still have a very tangible way to help people, and I'm never going to abandon that. I just encourage PTs that, are maybe burned out by something that's in their day to day. It's like, don't feel like you're stuck there. We're put in a box, we're stuck in a little bit of a rigid structure with our healthcare system, but that doesn't mean you have to play by those rules.
I joke around with the guys that I do live streams with. I'm like, well, you could go to a Facebook group and bitch about it. That's probably helpful. And listen, I've bitched about stuff too, but then you got to do something about it. And if you think you're going to change the system, great, get to work. Like, I don't know how to change the system. I've tried. Maybe I've had a little help in changing a big thing. Great. The biggest thing you can change right away is like your situation. You are 100% in control of that, right? So, if you don't like it, you could scream at clouds, or like you could just start and listen. And you are somewhere right now where you are now living what you probably, however long ago when you started thinking about this, would have been like, that's the dream, or that's And I want to make sure I frame this right, which is you don't just hit the dream and then everything's coast mode, right? You're still working. Like, that's the thing, is like you're constant. But wherever you were 2 years ago, you'd be thrilled to know where you are now. And if that's not the case, it's one day or day one. Like, what are we gonna do, right?
Yeah.
And I want to caution people too. You don't need to know what it looks like. What you should say is, what do I want it to feel like? So when someone's like,
I like that.
what do I want my perfect day to be? And I'm like, I don't know, man, but I want to feel heard and helpful. And, I want to be doing a lot of different things or whatever. Start with the emotion, because how it'll look is different than like how it'll feel. And trust me, the feeling is the thing that makes people want to run or stay. That's usually, that's what I think a lot of clinicians will say about burnout, is they feel stuck. That's what they'll say. I feel stuck. And I'll say, I get it. I remember when I was a student, I ran into a girl who had graduated a year or two before me. And she's like, I work at this outpatient ortho clinic 2 days a week, and I work at inpatient neuro 3 days a week. And I was like, you can't do that. And she goes, you can. I remember just thinking she's like, I just told this clinic I'm only going to work 2 days a week. And they were like, so you can have 2 days or none. You could have me here 2 days or none. And they were like, okay. And then the inpatient neuro clinic was like, we need you. So she's like, great, I'm only working 3. And they're like, okay. Now it's easier said than done, but keep looking. If you ask and you get told no, like, okay, keep going. Like, you have to pitch a lot to get the thing to work sometimes.
Yeah, no, you touched on a lot of good things there. And one of my favorite sayings, it's like 2 best times to plant a tree, right? It's right now and 20 years ago, right? And so I think a lot of people have this paralysis when it comes to starting something that ultimately leads to inaction. And I was fortunate to receive some good mentorship, if you will, kind of early on, that was pretty much like, you just have to start. That means something different to everybody, but the smaller you make that first step, the more realistic it's going to be that you'll actually do it. And I went up full time, and I was like, okay, well, like you said, this isn't really where I want to be. This isn't what the emotion wants. This isn't what the day-to-day wants. So I was like, okay, well, how do I get to that 5-year point?
How do I close the gap?
Okay, well, how do I close the gap, right? And for me, it was kind of like, okay, let's supplement things with some PRN type things. And I was exactly that. I was in a hospital, 1 to 4 days during the week. I was in an outpatient clinic 2 to 3 times a week. I could take a whole week off, and then I'd just being the side business, side hustle person that I tend to kind of come up with. I had a staging installation business. I worked with interior designers, just like doing manual labor. Like, I love just staying active and busy. And if you aren't happy where you're at, you just got to do something. You know what I mean? And it's just like, you'll get there. But I think people are too afraid to take that step. And I think it's very much too often that you just make that step too big. You try to take a jump, and it's just like, let's walk before you run.
Love that. The other quote I like with that, the quote that you mentioned, which is the two best times to plant a tree 20 years ago and today. I like to pair it with the other one too, which is society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they'll never sit in, which is like you're going to do something that you know you will never benefit from. Yeah. Some of that work that you're doing, you're not going to see the return. Yeah. But a lot of the things that you enjoy now were done by people who did it, who never saw the return. And that's just, that's a fancy way of saying like, sort of like pay it forward. But that's where your Stoke trip too is like, maybe you never get paid for that trip, but you got paid for that trip. You know what I mean? Like you got it in your Stoke. Yeah,
absolutely.
Cody, last thing we do on the show is called the parting shot. What's something you want to leave with the audience? What's your mic drop moment? You can use a quote, you can reuse stuff that's allowed, whatever you'd want to, what's the last thing you want to leave on people's minds?
Yeah, I think that's tough. I even knew this was coming, and I didn't, I thought I was gonna have something good. I thought I was, my thing is like I got into PT because I wanted to help people, and for me, right now that looks a lot different than when I was full-time clinic care, and I think not being afraid to be afraid of change, right? I think that's, things are fluid and things are changing, and our healthcare system is all over the place, and, it kind of changes one day at a time, change it one room at a time, one conversation at a time. And so, being willing to ask, talk to people, that's one thing that I always appreciate. I get people that reach out to me on LinkedIn, like, hey, how'd you get there? Right. I love having those conversations because it just gets people to think differently, and, we're institutionalized in a way where we're kind of developed to think in certain ways, and it's the people that kind of step outside of that and look around that ultimately get where they want to be. They're the happy ones because they didn't let somebody else dictate what they spent their time doing. So yeah, I think I don't know if that's quite the mic drop moment I was hoping for, but if I can encourage one person to have a conversation and to reach out and just think differently about their current position, then I've won the day.
Yeah, it makes me think of another great quote. We're dropping quote bombs here.
I love it.
It's a great quote for PT as well, or rehab or anything, which is, if the plan doesn't work, change the plan, not the goal. Change the plan. So like your goal was to help people. And that in the beginning looked like walking into a clinic and helping people there. And then that didn't fulfill you, or maybe you just wanted to change. You changed the plan, but not the goal. The goal is still very much in your sights. Cody, appreciate the time, man. Thanks for doing this and sharing. And maybe one person out there is going, okay, all right, I saw one other person doing this. I was on the end of a diving board. I might do that too. So appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's be real. You didn't become a therapist to be average. You've got something in you that wants more mastery, more impact, more confidence in the clinic. That's exactly what Brooks Institute of Higher Learning delivers. Their residency and fellowship programs aren't just resume builders, they're transformation zones. You get one-on-one mentoring, deep dive classwork, labs, and real-time experience inside one of the most advanced rehab systems in the country. And the best part? You're not grinding this out on the side. You get a full salary and benefits while you train with the best. Whether it's ortho, neuro, peds, geriatrics, women's health, Brooks IHL helps you become the expert you know you're meant to be. Check out brooksihl.org to learn more and take that next step.